To further prove that nothing, and I mean nothing, is safe from the woke scolds taking over the world, Lord of the Rings, well, kind of, is going woke. Yes, the revolution must continue, and not even Gandalf, a white heterosexual male, might I add, can stop it. He was always so repressive and oppressive anyway. Now I'm talking about the Tolkien Society. So what is the Tolkien Society? People are supposed to love J.R.R. Tolkien, supposedly. These are people who take I love Lord of the Rings, but these people have way too much time on their hands with wokery. These people, they formed a society to supposedly promote the works of Tolkien himself. This is their self-description, and I quote, "The Tolkien Society is an educational charity, literary society, and international fan club devoted to promoting the life and works of J.R.R. Tolkien." So this is essentially a society for people who love Lord of the Rings, and they want to get together with other people who love Lord of the Rings and talk about Lord of the Rings. But as it turns out, and I consider myself a nerd on this, nerds can't nerd out without the fantasy world of wokery invading their fantasy world. So check out this actual agenda, a physical, literal, actual agenda for this year's seminar, first weekend of July. I have to read this to you. I saw it, so do you. At 2 p.m., those with gender dysphoria will not want to miss Gondor in Transition, a brief introduction to transgender realities in The Lord of the Rings. And at 3 p.m., here's a real barn burner, The Problem of Pain, portraying physical disability and the fantasy of J.R.R. Tolkien. And at 4:30, top off your coffee and get ready for The Invisible Other, Tolkien's Dwarf Women and the Feminine Lack. These seminars they're just enough to make you want to go and join Gollum in that cave, just to have a little bit of solitary existence and a peaceful life, rummaging around in the dark and in the crevasses for my precious. So that way, at least you don't have to spend time in a room with people who take fantasy worlds to this point. But this is what woke is. It's a fantasy to rule them all. Yes, it's a fictional world where unwell people believe things that aren't true, like that men can be women and appropriate that, and all of life is about obsessing over one's victimhood. And then they impose these beliefs on you. And once this fantasy invades, then it takes over and it removes everything that you've loved about formerly non-politicized things like the NBA and movies and NASCAR and Lord of the Rings, and replacing it with wokery. So after the woke fantasy takes over, you're no longer talking about hobbits. You're talking about disabilities or about the dwarf women. I guess they never heard Gimli talk about how they look like the men. Suddenly, there's less talk about spells and wizards and more talk about intersectionality and anti-racism, which is really racism. Now, given that Tolkien was best friends with they were both actually Christian apologetics, but C.S. Lewis, and that Tolkien himself was a diehard Roman Catholic, it's a wonder that Tolkien actually hasn't been canceled altogether and the whole entire conference renamed. I mean, Middle-earth was saved by toxic masculinity. I mean, maybe they could rename it like the Fellowship of the Ring-Nosed or the Wilting Flowers or the Return of the Queen. I'm just throwing out some ideas to all of you to make it more inclusive, because inclusive now apparently even trumps fantasy. Where do nerds go after this?